And we're off and running on the Krug Show. Friday means that I stream basically all day. Chase Sr. in the house, one of my favorite spots of the week. Most hated man. 49er content creation right now. I shouldn't say that. But we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. I should say that. They're in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. Go get the brisket chili. It's all amazing. Go say hi to Damon and Mary. Tell them the Krug sent you. And we're also brought to you by MarinAutoglass.com. Awesome company. Underdog Fantasy as well. Check the link in the description. Use the promo code Krug, and they'll match you up to your first $100. And Sharp Corners, sports cards and collectibles, 205 Cypress Avenue down in Monterey, in Pacific Grove to be exact. Call Anthony Catania. He's at 831-521-5264. What's up, Chase? What have you been doing, man? I haven't heard a whole lot about you recently. You're kind of under the radar. You're just kind of quiet.
Social media is a crazy place. You put out some opinions, you put out some thoughts, and you create some content on the 49ers, and sometimes things just take off and they blow up. And we're looking at a video that I put out on this report about a Brandon Aiyuk trade to the Steelers that has about 500,000 views right now, all thanks to Brandon Aiyuk's agent acting as though I was the one who reported the news. But that's social media. People don't take the time to watch the video sometimes or read the tweet. They just make up stuff, and then I'm getting the backlash for it, and people are calling me all types of names, but it's all good. I've been enjoying it. Been enjoying the interaction, whether people love me or hate me. It is what it is.
Sven says, FYI, Larry, you spelled Brandon wrong in the video title. Oh, I'm going to blame Kev. That's Kev. I mean, I would say it's me. I'd take ownership of it. It's Kev, and he's...
Come on, Kev.
Come on, Kev. That's a Brandon Pajemski Brandon. That's not a Brandon Aiyuk Brandon. Sven, I will scold him when he gets home. He's coming from Cal Poly today with his girlfriend. They're going to Giants Diamondbacks tonight. So I will see him later today. And I don't know if I can make the change before the end of the stream. We may have just live with it. But let's talk a little bit about the latest, because Kev did quickly change the title from the latest 49er Brandon Aiyuk news, trade rumors, extensions with Chase Sr. What is the latest? I was just doing a stream with Damon Bruce, and I guess while we were doing it, Brandon went on his IG and said, we're going to see fireworks on draft day. Is that pretty much the long and the short of it?
Yeah, so what Brandon Aiyuk just posted on his Instagram story was a screenshot of a FaceTime that he was doing with Jaden Daniels, who could go number 2 in the draft to the Commanders. He could go number 3 to the New England Patriots. He's looked at as one of the top quarterbacks in this draft class, and Aiyuk was at Arizona State with him back a few years ago when Aiyuk was playing in college. So they do have a relationship, and Jaden Daniels, when I was at the NFL Combine, actually talked about how Aiyuk has really helped him in the pre-draft process with just getting ready for meetings, getting ready for how to get acclimated for the NFL level. And the caption on that Instagram story is, "Brother said we got 6 days and it's fireworks." Now, that's of note because that could be Jaden Daniels getting ready to get drafted. Number 2, number 3 is Jaden Daniels hinting that maybe the Chicago Bears take him at number 1, because that would cause a lot of fireworks. Or is Brandon Aiyuk posting that because he has some insight that maybe a draft night trade could go down where the San Francisco 49ers trade away Brandon Aiyuk? He's trolled us all off season, yet it's hilarious how people get mad at us for talking about the speculation and the trade rumors when this has been the playbook of Aiyuk all offseason, Larry. And I just broke this down on a video and on a new tweet. This offseason, Aiyuk has tweeted directly at Steelers head coach Mike Tomlin, posted on Instagram that money talks, bullshit walks, unfollowed the Niners on social media, posted on Instagram that the doghouse is the only place for a big dog, just posted this Instagram story referring to fireworks 6 days away from the draft. His family said after the Super Bowl, he's going to lead the Niners and play for the Las Vegas Raiders. His agent has been doing damage control on social media, shutting down these trade rumors. This is a modern-day playbook of what contract negotiations and what a standoff and what hardball looks like here in 2024, yet his agent is wondering why there's all this speculation when Aiyuk and his camp are the ones who have caused all of this speculation.
How can, and nothing, I don't know his agent. His name's Ryan Williams.
Yep.
What's the name of the agency again? Do we
Athletes
know?
First.
Athletes First. Yeah. I don't know Ryan Williams. I wouldn't recognize him if he walked right through the door. But how can you get mad at people that are commenting on reports when your client is openly contacting in a public forum head coaches of other teams as if to say, I'd love to play for you? That alone, it's like you would think that the agent would just be like, well, what can I do? What can I say? Aiyuk himself has fed into it. That to me is just, it's baffling. And then not only did the All Steelers guy, and I don't know the All Steelers guy, but Grant Cohn says that he's a credible guy with, who may have sources within the Steeler walls there. Instead of commenting on that guy's report, he waits until you comment on that report and then crushes you and tries to dunk on you. I thought that was interesting. And then if you really wanted to shut it all down, why wouldn't you just come out and just straight deny it? Or set the record straight or come out with a strong statement that instead of just saying, oh, these people and their sources and, who are you listening to? Why not just say, I'm his agent and he's not going to be traded, everybody. That would shut everything down completely, but he hasn't done that. So, I mean, all I've got to say is the agent going to sit there and apologize and backtrack if he does get dealt? Because he's going to owe you specifically and many others a huge apology if he does get traded. And the other thing I would say is a lot of people, you're reporting this stuff. You're giving your opinion. As soon as I saw your report of this, I retweeted it immediately and commented because it was such a strong report, and it felt like new ground had been plowed. So how could he blame anybody for commenting on something? I mean, seems like he should have gone after all Steelers and gone at them instead he went at you. What do you make of that?
Yeah, he quote tweets my tweet and it just immediately takes off where it hits this different jet stream and this different stratosphere. And it's a little bit unfair to me because then people are acting as though I'm reporting the news when simply I was just sharing an opinion on it. And people are like, you're a journalist with no integrity. How could you say something like this?
Well, first of all, Williams, we're not journalists.
On you.
Yeah, we're not journalists. We're and people look up the terms. Journalists are journalists. We are video editorialists. We are essentially, if this were a newspaper, we're columnists.
Yes.
But go ahead.
And that's part of the point that I was going to make here is that since 5 years old, I've wanted to be a sports broadcaster. I've never wanted to be a journalist. I've never wanted to be a newsbreaker, an Ian Rappaport or an Adam Schefter, an Adrian Wojnarowski or a Shams Charania. I do what I do right now because I believe that I have good opinions. I like providing thought-provoking content. I like to drive conversations. I like to make people think. And the opinionated nature of what I do as a talk show host, a broadcaster, a content creator is at the backbone of what I do. So if I see a report out there that's being reported and referencing people inside the Steelers organization having to do with Brandon Aiyuk, who's a second-team All-Pro, the Niners' best wide receiver, one of the best wideouts in the NFL, I'm going to talk about it here. And it's lazy work by Brandon Aiyuk's agent to quote tweet me and call me out for reporting fake news when I'm not reporting anything. I said in the tweet, reports. I didn't say according to my sources. Now at the NFL Combine, I did report that Aiyuk's agent and John Lynch are best friends. So that's very interesting because it's not like you have a Scott Boras who will play hardball with the organization or Drew Rosenhaus who will play hardball with an organization. I believe And I think that the actions of an agent doing damage control on social media, quote tweeting commentaries and reports is interesting, and we've never seen anything like it because Aiyuk's agent and John Lynch are best friends. They want to control the narrative. And it's up to Aiyuk's agent to get his client paid so that he can get compensated as well for that Aiyuk contract, but he's also trying to do John Lynch a favor and not really reveal what the trade offers are, what the compensation is, because that can affect the price tag for Brandon Aiyuk. So people can say whatever the hell they want about me. I'm not a journalist. I consider myself a sports broadcaster. I believe I'm really good at what I do. And if you want to rip me, that's fine. I didn't do anything wrong. I shared my opinion. It's bad work by Aiyuk's agent. And again, let me go back to everything that I just went through. We wouldn't have this speculation if Aiyuk and his camp weren't going about it in a drama-filled way. What drama was there about Nick Bosa's contract extension, which lasted until September? And here we are at the end of April. This is a Deebo Samuel playbook, which is now getting to the level of being even more dramatic than the Deebo Samuel situation. Aiyuk and his camp were causing all of this conversation to happen. And I think that Aiyuk and maybe the Niners are starting to feel a little bit pressure as we approach the NFL draft because they understand, shoot, if we can't get a deal done, we have to be able to find Aiyuk's replacement. And until a deal is struck, Ryan Williams, people are still going to talk about this because it's a marquee storyline across the entire NFL.
You know, and when we say we're not journalists, that doesn't mean that we don't feel or believe in credibility. You believe strongly in credibility. I believe strongly in credibility. Do we do things and essentially get attention in the form of clicks? And sure, but I'm not doing this for clicks. I'm not doing this for 45 minutes and trying to be a star today. People are like, oh, people trying to make a name for themselves, people trying to be stars. This wouldn't have you probably wouldn't have even have gone with this if we didn't already have Aiyuk tweeting at Mike Tomlin, if we didn't have him doing several steps that make you think that there is some credibility to it. To me, one of the most revealing parts of this was Brock Purdy's quote to Cam Inman, where he's like, you know, he made it sound almost like they weren't going to see each other again. Like, you know, I forget the exact quote, but it was something along the lines of, you know,
he's spoken past tense.
Yeah. I appreciate what Brandon has done for my career. I mean, it was the kind of thing that makes you think that he's never going to see Brandon again. And that he wanted to have that out there. You know, it was, so there's just all these things lend credence to this. What do you believe the fireworks is that Brandon referenced in his IG? Do you think that's related to Daniels or do you think that's related to Aiyuk?
I think it's related to Jaden Daniels, but Brandon Aiyuk knows what he's doing. This is a calculated move. It's the same calculated move as when he picks up his phone and he unfollows the 49ers on Instagram, knowing that for the last several years in this player empowerment era, during all of these contract negotiations, that as soon as a player unfollows the team that they play for, that they are under contract for, somebody's going to screenshot that. They're going to tweet it. They're going to put it on Instagram. And immediately when that became public, Ian Rappaport, Mike Garafolo, all tweeting about it, which then leads to you and I talking about it. And then fans being in shambles. Oh my gosh, is Aiyuk unhappy? He just unfollowed the Niners on Instagram. Clearly things aren't on the right road as far as a contract extension goes. Clearly, there's hardball being played on both sides, and Brandon Aiyuk is unfollowing the Niners to put pressure on San Francisco to let them know that he's unhappy. And it's the same calculated move for when he takes to Instagram 6 days away from the NFL draft to say there could be some fireworks going down. And just 2 drafts ago, we saw A.J. Brown traded to the Philadelphia Eagles from the Tennessee Titans in a move that was a franchise-altering move for Philadelphia, a bad move for Tennessee. He was a bona fide top 10, top 15 wide receiver at that time, and it's literally the same conversation with Aiyuk. And if the Niners were to trade Aiyuk away, they want to do so, ideally, as far as team-building strategy goes, before the draft or on the night of the draft, because this is a deep and very talented wide receiver class where you have X boundary outside wide receivers who are dogs, but also if you're looking for the prototype of a slot wide receiver, there are a lot of those as well. And the Niners need to figure out, is Aiyuk going to be in our plans for 2024 and beyond? If he is, then maybe we go with a different position in the draft because we have needs at offensive guard, center, offensive tackle, defensive tackle, at cornerback. What if a player like Kool-Aid McKinstry falls to number 31? Do you go that route or do you need a wide receiver? So all of this has kind of boiled to a point where there's so much that has to be figured out, and the draft is getting here, and it's going to be here before we know it.
Yeah. Oh, and it just is building to a crescendo. It's gonna be really interesting to watch. Okay. Now, since we've basically gotten little snapshots of information and tweets and Instagram releases and quotes and this and that, it's really, and guys like us, we're here to talk about the hottest topics around the team, and speculation is what everybody does everywhere. Niner fans who are, at work right now are speculating to each other. Well, I think it's this and I think it's that. This is what I think it is, because ultimately the one wrinkle here that's different than other situations is the relationship between Lynch and the agent. Normally, an agent probably wouldn't care that much about speculation about a trade, because he would know that whoever trades for Aiyuk, if the Niners wind up trading Brandon Aiyuk, his leverage goes way, way up, because now a team potentially has traded their first-round draft choice to get the guy. And so if you're asking for $30 million, well, they just traded their first-round pick to get him, so your leverage goes up. But in this situation where they're close, I think Lynch has told the agent, hey, you know what? Do me a solid, and, let's try to continue painting the picture of that we could go in any direction. We could keep him. We could do this. We could trade him. We could trade him to this team, that team. Let's not paint the picture of, you know what? He's already priced himself out. Our budget was $23 million. He wants 30, and we have to trade him, because then we lose leverage and we can't get what we want. And if we can't get what we want, we really don't want to move him, and then it just drags the thing out. So I think I'm reading this as the agent doing Lynch a solid by pushing back on these reports that, the Niners, are going to move him. And like the Steeler report was like, hey, you know what? We feel like we're going to get him, and maybe at our price. I think they're kind of working in cahoots with one another to try to maintain the trade value and the illusion that the 49ers may have options here. I think the 49ers don't really have the options, and I think the agent and Lynch are trying to control the narrative that they do have options. That's my read on it.
Exactly, and that was my read on it yesterday when I hopped on with Grant Cohn, that the Niners are trying to really control the narrative here. And I tweeted that out, and people are like, just give it up, Chase. You're trying to get attention at this point. This is how these things go. And the fact that people are taking everything that agents say as gospel is pretty much like, in this day and age, if you take everything that a politician says as gospel. It's all about leverage here. And for the agent, they want to get their client paid. That is their job. Otherwise, they're going to get fired. And when that client gets paid, they get a little bit of a cut of that contract. And I think you make some really good points there. Let's just throw out the Pittsburgh Steelers once again, because according to the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, according to numerous reports, Omar Khan has checked in on wide receivers, really wants to bring another one in to get that offense on track that's been mundane for the last several years since Ben Roethlisberger's arm was cooked. They have George Pickens. They have Pat Freiermuth. They're going to try to improve that offensive line. They always live and die by the ground game. They have an excellent defense. So it makes sense for Pittsburgh to be a destination for a player like Brandon Aiyuk, because then you get Aiyuk, George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth. You're hoping that Russell Wilson can find what he had a couple of years ago. If not, you have an intriguing player in Justin Fields. And Omar Khan has been all in on trying to find a wideout. They have the 20th overall pick in the draft, right? And Aiyuk was the 25th overall pick back in 2020. Now he's become an all-pro player. I think if you have an all-pro player who you traded 25 overall, the asking price has to be a first-round pick.
Especially when he's 26. He's only 26.
He's only 26 years old. I still think he's scratching the surface of what he can become because he was a JUCO guy, a little bit of a late bloomer, and every year that he's been in the NFL, his numbers have gotten progressively better and better. So if another team out there sees, oh man, Steelers might offer 20, we can't offer 20 for Brandon Aiyuk. If that's the asking price, shoot, that's going to be too rich for us. Even if we try to offer a second and a third, the Niners are still going to turn that down. We're not even going to start with these contract talks with him. We're not even going to start with these potential trade conversations. We'll let him go to Pittsburgh. So then Lynch is like, well, shoot, if we're only rumored to be trading him to Pittsburgh, Ryan Williams, shoot this down. There are other teams involved. There are other teams interested. So shoot this down so that other teams don't think, okay, Pittsburgh, we just can't match their asking price.
Well, and then there's also the, how much money, it sounds like the Steelers would like the Niners to pay some of the contract this year. And maybe the compensation, hey, if you pay all the contract, we'll give you the 20th pick. Yep. If we pay all the contract, we don't want to give you the 20th pick. And it becomes leverage. And it's like, who's more desperate? Well, no, you're more desperate, John, because you got an asset that you can't afford and it's going to walk away. And John's saying, hey, no, Omar, you're more desperate. You haven't won a playoff game in 5 years. And, you don't have, and Tomlin wins in the regular season, but it's Pittsburgh. It's a football crazy town, and you haven't won a playoff game in a long time. And you need you're a run first offense, and this is a run blocking wide receiver. This guy's going to do things in the run game that George Pickens would never do. We saw that last year. And there, it's like, who's more desperate? And then if you have the illusion that it's all Pittsburgh or nothing, then, the agent also could be pushing back on the idea that, hey, this is some kind of a done deal, because the Niners don't want it to be a done deal. They want Jacksonville to bid, and they may want the Chargers to bid, and they may want Buffalo, who's very desperate for a wide receiver, to bid. And who knows, their interest is get the best offer they can. My belief, though, is that Aiyuk's demands have already exceeded what the Niners are willing to pay. And that's why, and this fireworks thing, I think, is probably an Aiyuk trade. And I do understand why fans are pushing back so hard on guys like yourself or me or anybody who they perceive as pushing the Aiyuk trade narrative, because they love Aiyuk and they know Aiyuk's their best receiver, and fans keep it real simple. It's like, hey man, I'd rather move Debo. Of course you'd rather move Debo. He's older. He's not as healthy. He's not as productive. He's not going to be as good in the future.
Yeah.
But that's in a vacuum. And I mean, you have to look at the whole picture of, they're going to pay their quarterback $50 million. And now they got a receiver who may be asking for $30 million. And so fans want to push back on anybody that they think is going to spew a narrative that they don't like because they like the player. If we were talking about, man, the Niners are going to trade Danny Gray for a 3rd-round pick, there'd be all kinds of people being like, way to go, Chase. Way to go, Krug. I'm totally with you. I love you guys. Your coverage is awesome. As soon as it's like, wait, Aiyuk? No, I love Aiyuk. Aiyuk's good. I don't want to trade Aiyuk. And then suddenly it's let's demonize anybody who's in their mind pushing that narrative. We're not necessarily pushing any narrative. I know you and I haven't talked about this, but I'm pretty convinced that you feel the same way I feel, which is we're not wishing for Aiyuk to be traded. We're just observing the tea leaves and trying to read it for our audience and trying to make sense of it.
If there's anybody who has been ahead of the game and ahead of the pack on their praise of Brandon Aiyuk, it's been me. I love the selection of him at 25 overall. When he leaped over Marcus Epps in that primetime game against the Philadelphia Eagles en route to going to the end zone on that ridiculous play, what a phenomenal play that was. Going into the 2022 season, I was saying that Brandon Aiyuk is a better player than CeeDee Lamb, a more all-around wide receiver. I like his toughness more. I like his makeup more. I'd rather have Brandon Aiyuk than CeeDee Lamb. And that was before, in 2023, he became an all-pro player. I have said time and time again, he's special. He's the Niners' best wide receiver. He's worked up this great relationship with Brock Purdy, and you want to do everything that you can to surround your young quarterback with great offensive weapons to help maximize him. I've said he's better than Deebo Samuel. I've said that he deserves this new contract, which will pay him top 5 wide receiver money. As part of that conversation, this is when the Niners kind of shoot themselves in the foot too. They wait until late in the game to hand out contract extensions to their homegrown players. It's happened the last 4 off seasons. George Kittle in 2021, Fred Warner 2022, Deebo Samuel 2023 or 2022. I got the order wrong. George Kittle, Fred Warner, Deebo Samuel, Nick Bosa, all in consecutive years. Aiyuk's looking to become the 5th homegrown player to get that contract. When you wait, you risk the asking price continuing to go up and be on the uptick. And now, because the Niners have waited to pay Brandon Aiyuk, Calvin Ridley reset the market with getting $23 million per year. Aiyuk is younger, better, more productive, more available, didn't have a gambling suspension for an entire year. So now the asking price goes to $24 million. He outplayed Deebo Samuel, right? Deebo's making 24. So now Aiyuk deserves even more than that. And then this past week, Devontae Smith, $25 million per year. Now the asking price for Aiyuk has gone from maybe 23 to 24 to 25 to 25 and a half, 26, $27 million because the Niners have waited. And if the Niners continue to wait, what happens if CD Lamb gets $30 million per year? What happens when Justin Jefferson gets $32 million per year from a team? What then happens to the asking price of Brandon Aiyuk, who would say, I put up all this production in a run-centric offense on a team with other loaded weapons. What if I go somewhere like a Jamar Chase, who's also due for a contract extension, and he could reset the market, who has 100 targets per year? What if I have those amount of targets? My numbers are only going to go up. I think I'm on par with those players. Niners, now you got to give me $28 million. When in reality, if you got this deal done earlier in the process, it could have come at $25, $26 million if you got ahead of the game.
You went to the combine. You got a good sense of the draft coming up. The Niners, let's just say this actually goes down and they could get the 20th pick. You know, one of the things that they did last time with the Buckner deal was they turned Buckner into a first-round pick. But then they turned that first-round pick into Javon Kinlaw, and the two were forever compared. I kind of sense that they want to do it differently, but you never know. If they had the 20th pick and the 31st pick, and you've seen the group of wide receivers, Harrison's gone, Malik Neighbors is gone, Adunze's gone, maybe Brian Thomas is there at 20. If you don't go Brian Thomas at 20, then he's probably gone by 31. Who do you think of the group of wide receivers is their guy? Matt Barrows made his draft crush from Adonai Mitchell from Texas.
Yeah.
Of course, Shanahan played wide receiver at Texas once upon a time. Mitchell started at Georgia and transferred. But what do you think? It's a deep crop of receivers. There's a bunch of guys, and they're all a little bit different. Is there a receiver that you think fits the Niners and could you see them going receiver at 20? Or do you think they would go tackle at 20 and maybe receiver at 31? Do you think they might go receiver later in the draft? What receiver do you think they would target if they moved off of Aiyuk?
I think if you go with the wide receiver at 20, you're looking at 2 players. You're looking at Brian Thomas out of LSU if he falls, or Adonai Mitchell at 20 if he falls. If you decide to go offensive lineman, then at 31, I don't think that Thomas or Mitchell are going to be there. I think you're looking at the grouping of an Xavier Worthy, who's an underrated route runner, 4.21 speed. He's a Deshaun Jackson clone to me, under 170 pounds, but an absolute burner. And can you imagine if Danny Gray worked out what a vertical threat could do with Aiyuk and Deebo and George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey to take the top off of the defense? What that does, it just opens up the field so much from sideline to sideline, but also vertically. Think about a player like Xavier Worthy who can get up and down in a blink. And then the crossers that Deebo can run, the crossers and the out routes or the shallow crosses that Aiyuk can run, the seam ball, the number ball that's going to be available for George Kittle or Christian McCaffrey coming out of the backfield. So I think those are the 3 wide receivers that you'd be looking at 20 or at 31. My draft crush, I'm with Barrows. I love AD Mitchell. I think he's a fantastic player. I know he has one good year of production at Texas, but he's a Georgia transfer, and he goes to Texas and has 55 catches, 845 yards, and 11 touchdowns this past year. And he's long. He's a loose athlete, long strides. He can accelerate really quickly. At 6'2", 205, he ran a 4.34 40-yard dash, and he has everything to his route tree. And you can use him in just a variety of ways. So if I had to choose between AD Mitchell and Brian Thomas, I'd probably go AD Mitchell at 20. At 31, if you wait, I'd probably go with Xavier Worthy. But do you trade back? That's a possibility too, where if you trade back, you can go Xavier Legette, AJ Brown body type, Malachi Corley, a Deebo Samuel clone. Do you want a slot? And if you want a slot, then you're looking at a Ladd McConkey, a Ricky Pearsall, a Roman Wilson. It depends on the prototype of wide receiver that you want, but this is why the Niners are trying to figure out what's going on the Aiyuk front, because this wide receiver class is really, really good. If you want to wait a little bit later, I talked about this player on my show this week in my mock, and I know you did as well. How about Malik Washington out of Virginia? He's shorter, 5'9", but led the ACC in receiving, and he is a burner who is shifty in short area bursts, which is really, really impressive. And if he's in the slot, that's a player who I think is going to climb up draft boards.
More so than almost any other position on the field, your wide receiver core, the players have to complement one another.
Yeah.
So you can't have all vertical threats. You can't have all Deebo Samuels. You got to have guys who complement one another. What do you think of Tyler Boyd? Have you heard anything about Boyd? I know you know him well from Pittsburgh, and we just saw him look really good against the Niners, when Cincinnati rolled in and he burned them for 3 catches and a touchdown. How do you see it? Let's just say you think they would go after a Boyd if they moved an Aiyuk, and then if you have Boyd, maybe he's running the cross the middle routes. Maybe Worthy is more of a fit because you want somebody to run off the coverage. I love what I see from Legette, and I see a lot of AJ Brown in him. He just seems like, but there's some rawness to his in and out of break stuff. So I don't know if he's going to succeed right away. He might be a year off. But what do you think? I mean, do you think Boyd's still in the picture? And do you think if they did get a guy like Boyd, who's the complimentary receiver to him?
I think that's a good contingency plan. Let's say that the Niners trade away Brandon Aiyuk and they draft a wide receiver with 1 first-round pick, and then they go offensive lineman with that other selection. I really like the thought of that strategy. I would hate trading away Brandon Aiyuk because I don't give away special players. I like to pay homegrown special players, but let's operate under the premise. You trade away Brandon Aiyuk. You draft a wide receiver. You don't really want to have to overly rely on a rookie wide receiver to consistently be your number 2 or number 3 option. Deebo would be your number 1, but that's a tall ask for a rookie to come in on a team with Super Bowl aspirations to have a Justin Jefferson type of year 1 where he blows everybody out of the water and is just highly productive right from the jump. He might have some good moments, some good games, but you can't be overly reliant on a young player to be a marquee weapon for your team. So then I think that Tyler Boyd makes a lot of sense to kind of be that number 2 hybrid number 3 while you still have Jauan Jennings too. So then you're looking at a wide receiving room of Deebo Samuel, a rookie, Tyler Boyd, and Jauan Jennings. That's a pretty solid top 4 right there. And all of those different wide receivers are of different varieties that I think complement each other really well. Boyd can go in the slot. He can go on the outside. He's been a very durable, productive, and consistent player. And he came into the league with pretty good draft pedigree as well, because he was drafted in the 2nd round all the way back in 2016. He's kind of fallen under the radar the last couple of years behind Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. But you look at his production since 2018, 7 touchdowns, 5, 4, 5, 5, and 2. And he's had 2 1,000-yard seasons in that span, followed by 2 800-yard seasons, 762 in 2022, and then 667 in 2023. Keep in mind that Joe Burrow got injured. So I think that if you brought in a player like Tyler Boyd and you have Juwan Jennings, Deebo Samuel, that's where I think a slot wide receiver might make some sense. But I think you could also make the argument, then you lose that deep threat in Brandon Aiyuk. You need a guy who can get up and down, right? So that's where Xavier Worthy might make some sense. That's where an AD Mitchell on the perimeter might make some sense. I think that you'd still want to get that player who's capable of taking the top off of the defense, because Deebo can't really do it. Boyd isn't that. Juwan Jennings definitely isn't that.
And you can't rely on Danny Gray to be that. And
No.
I've talked to Shanahan before. I said, how important is it to have the receiver that runs off the coverage? And he's like, vital. He's like, and this is a play caller who understands offensive football is about creating space. If you got that kind of a player, the defense knows. Shanahan said to me, he's like, the defense knows how fast all these guys run. So if you got a true burner out there, they have to honor that. And they would love to have Danny Gray come of age, and I don't know if they can depend on that. We got this one in the chat from Mike Canazaro. He says, Michael Catanzaro. He says, my friend's seen rumors of the 49ers trading Aiyuk to the Chargers for the 5th pick in the draft. Has anyone else seen those rumors? This was something that you discussed with Grant on his stream yesterday. Bill Barnwell does a mock draft where he basically has every team in the league making a trade. And for the Niners, he threw out this trade: Brandon Aiyuk, the 31st pick and a 3rd to the Chargers for the 5th pick in the draft and a 6th round pick, and had the Niners still selecting, in his theory, Malik Neighbors, who I think is the best wide receiver in the draft. I like him the most. Chargers, of course, have nothing at wide receiver. They said goodbye to Mike Williams, Keenan Allen. They do have the 5th most cap space in the NFL, and I could see Aiyuk being very popular with Jim Harbaugh, who wants to win now. He doesn't want to win in 3 years. He's thinking about winning now. And you've got a star quarterback. He doesn't have receivers. You're going to lean on Quentin Johnston and to make it, to have a big step up in year 2, or you're going to go get an all-pro guy like Aiyuk. All receivers are kind of speculative in the first round, even the great ones. One, what do you think of that rumor? I mean, Barnwell kind of made it up. It's not necessarily a rumor per se. It's more just his theory.
Yeah.
I like it, and I would do it. I like Malik Neighbors that much, and I think he's so great that he's more on the line of Jefferson and Chase and would give them a true number 1 alpha. I'd make that move. Would you?
Yeah, when Grant brought that up, I'm thinking to myself, okay, so you're looking at a Chargers team that got rid of Mike Williams for cap reasons, traded away Keenan Allen for cap reasons, and then had to restructure the contracts for Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, all because of financial ramifications. But
now have a ton of cap room, essentially.
So that's what I'm about to get to, is that they were $20 million going into the new league year prior to those moves and those contract restructures. Now that they've opened up money, though, and I didn't realize this, and this is what Grant brought up, is that the Chargers now have $30 million in cap space. So originally I'm thinking, okay, why would the Chargers, for financial reasons, get rid of their top 2 wide receivers and then trade for Brandon Aiyuk, knowing that they're going to have to give him a contract extension? Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But they have $30 million now, and they need a number 1 wide receiver for Justin Herbert. And if you're thinking about a wide receiver who Jim Harbaugh would love, it's a player like Aiyuk. Complete player, really good blocker, tough and rugged. He goes about his craft in the right way, and he's physical. And Jim Harbaugh builds his teams on physicality. Then you think about the skill set for Aiyuk and him as a complementary player to Justin Herbert. The deep threat that he could pose for that Chargers offense, I think could help that offense dramatically and give Justin Herbert that number 1 go-to guy. And if you're San Francisco, Aiyuk asks for $30 million. Let's just call it that. Way too much for their liking, considering the cap situation that they're in, knowing that Brock Purdy is going to be due for a contract extension. But then they're looking at premium draft capital where they can draft a player like Malik Neighbors. And I'm with you. You can make the argument he's the number 1 wide receiver in this draft class. You get him now for the next 5 years, where you reset the wide receiver clock here. You exercise that 5th-year option. And if he pans out, he could be really good. If not, maybe even better than Brandon Aiyuk for a fraction of the price. Now, I think what makes sense for the Chargers, and Jim Harbaugh talked about this at the NFL owners meetings, he loves to fortify the offensive line. He did it at Stanford. He did it with the Niners. He did it at Michigan. And at the NFL owners meetings, he's saying, what's the one position group that everybody else relies on? The offensive line. And Joe Alt is sitting right there for the Los Angeles Chargers, where if you have Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt as your two offensive tackles, that's pretty damn good. And then you figure out wide receiver a little bit later in this deep wide receiver class. But if you're the Niners and Aiyuk wants out or his asking price is too high, that's the type of deal that I'm looking for, which blows that Steelers offer out of the water.
There's only a couple minutes left with Chase, but what helps Brock Purdy more? This is almost the Penei Sewell, Jamar Chase deal. Alt or Neighbors?
Well, man, that's a great question.
And of course the other part of it is, if you didn't go O-line, you went Neighbors, you'd have to go O-line later. If you didn't go receiver with Neighbors, you went Alt, you'd have to go wide receiver later.
Yeah. I think the play there, I'd probably go Joe Alt. And if you still have the 31st pick, great. You dropped a wide receiver there. Some still really good players available. All of the names that we mentioned. If you don't have that 31st overall pick, I still think that with your second round selection, you can get a legitimate wideout. A Malachi Corley might be there. A Roman Wilson might be there. And you can still address that need and that gap within your offense in the second round if you do go offensive lineman with that premium draft capital.
Last one before we let you go. If the Niners don't make a move with Aiyuk, let's just say they re-sign him for the sake of the conversation, and they're picking at 31, and they're going to do something on the line of scrimmage. They're going offensive tackle or they're going defensive line. Who's your guy? Who, speculating on who's going to be there, of course, but who would be your offensive lineman that you would want? Who would be your defensive lineman that you would want at 31?
I would think about moving up a couple of spots for Amarius Mims. I know he only has 8 college starts, but he's 6'8", 340. He has like nearly 36, 37-inch arms. I think that if you pair him up with Trent Williams, he's going to be able to help streamline his development. I've never been a big fan of Colton McKivitz, but that's at least your stopgap option if Amarius Mims needs that time to refine his skills and develop a little bit because of the lack of college experience. Tyler Guyton is another player that I like that I would think about moving up for. If you stay put at number 31, Jordan Morgan, Kingsley Suamataia, I think those are players. If you want to go interior, I like Graham Barton. I like your boy Zach Frazier. I don't think maybe Jackson Powers Johnson is there. If you go defensive lineman, Johnny Newton out of Illinois, if you want to address defensive tackle, there's some recent buzz there. But Chop Robinson is the player that I would absolutely love at 31. That's another player that I would move up for in the draft.
All right, man. Love streaming with you every Friday. Have a great Friday. Have a great weekend. The draft is almost here. I love that one guy who's like, Chase, having a rough morning. I mean, it's like, what? And you're like, yeah, I went running. I did this. I'm feeling good. It's like,
I feel great, man. I'm having an awesome day. I'm having an awesome life, and I'm very blessed and thankful, and I could not complain about anything right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna get into the chat and read some of these, so I'll let you go, brother. Cool. Thanks for the time. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you. Maybe do we have time to do next Friday between what rounds? Between day 1 and day 2?
Yeah, I should be good. I'm going to be live every day, every round, every pick on the 49ers report. And wow. I know it's a little bit of a later start on that Friday. I should be able to come on. I'd really like to. I'll touch base with you, but I always have a blast doing this. And thanks to everybody for tuning in.
Thanks, man. Have a great Friday.
Yep.
There you go.